Right, so welcome everyone. My name is Kristen Taylor. I'm the curator of academic programs and collections at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. And we're so excited to have Lorenzo Triburgo and your partner, Sarah. Sarah, what is your last name? I'm so sorry.
Van Dyke.
Van Dyke. Sarah Van Dyke here joining us today. Just a brief introduction to this program and to Lorenzo and Sarah's practice. The museum is hosting virtual studio visits every Friday at noon. And we're also doing a collection viewing and discussion around certain themes in the collection every Wednesday at noon. So please check mocp.org regularly to see what we have planned because it changes and updates often, and we're going to keep doing these programs for as long as the museum is closed to the public and hopefully afterwards. So a little bit about your work. Lorenzo Triburgo is a Brooklyn-based artist employing performance, photography, video, and audio to cast a critical lens on notions of the quote-unquote natural, the construct of gender, and the politics of queer representation. Lorenzo has artworks in our permanent collection and also the Portland Art Museum in Oregon, and has exhibited and lectured in cities throughout the world. Lorenzo was awarded a workplace residency at the Camera Club of New York at Baxter Street in 2019, and is a 2020 AIM Fellow at the Bronx Museum of the Arts. And additionally, Lorenzo teaches critical theory art and gender studies at Oregon State University's online campus. So we're going ahead and have you take over, but if anyone has questions, please post them in the Q&A, and I will either periodically or at the end ask you those questions so you can answer them live. And then if you just want to share feedback or thoughts, feel free to also use the chat option, but make sure you select to chat to all attendees and panelists. It's kind of the second default so that everyone can see your thoughts. But we'll go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, hi. I successfully unmuted myself before beginning to talk, which is, next level Zoom usage. But I'm going to talk today mostly about my project, Policing Gender. I feel like it's really important to attend to the systemic racism in our country and globally. But I feel like that project is a really good entry point into discussions around prison abolition, the role of queer activism towards prison abolition, why that's really important, and how chipping away at the prison industrial complex is a key component to chipping away at racism in our country. Also, Sarah is here. Sarah is my partner. She's an industrial organizational psychologist who specializes in mixed methods, research and blending and translating qualitative audio and visual and narrative sources with quantitative data. And Sarah's work centers on gender identity and LGBTQIA research in applied settings. And she's currently an ABD, all but dissertation, doctoral candidate in applied psychology at Portland State University, and lives and works in Brooklyn with me. So we're in our studio. I teach online, so we've been working together and lucky enough to work together from home for a number of years now, and this is our shared studio space. So I kind of want this to be casual and conversational, but I am going to do a presentation. But like Kristen mentioned, please jump in with questions and things, and we'll talk as we go. So give me one moment. I'm just going to share my screen, and then we'll jump into that presentation. Let's see, my chat window disappears, but Kristen, can you confirm for me that my screen is being shared correctly right now, that you all are seeing my intro slide?
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, so like I said, I'm going to be talking mostly about policing gender. And so for this project, I was really thinking about the role in photography and how can images create change. As an artist, what can I do towards prison abolition? But I want to actually, so this is an image from Policing Gender, and I'll circle back to this. But I just wanted to quickly start. I just have one slide with my previous body of work called Trans Portraits. I started Trans Portraits in 2008. And at that time, I felt like there was a real need for positive representations of trans people, but really trans masculinities. And so one of the reasons I like to bring this up is because in 2008, remember, this is before Instagram, right? It's not that long ago, 2008, but also kind of like incredibly long ago in terms of way that visual representations and also just the production of visual media has increased. So anyway, I felt like there was a real need for positive representations, but also representations that were created by queer people, and that we still do like have a need to create our own artifacts, both for our current living and historically. Then I received a grant to start working on Policing Gender in 2013. And at that point, just 5 years later, I felt like there was, an increase in visual representation, which was both positive, but also that trans bodies were being commodified, and sort of the visual culture, like trans visual culture, was being commodified and co-opted. And so I kind of was thinking about how do I address the prison industrial complex, and how do I address the issues surrounding queer imprisonment without relying on tropes in photography and without exploiting people. So I got in touch with Black and Pink, which is a prison abolition organization in support of queer prisoners. And I began writing with over 30 LGBTQ prisoners on a monthly basis for over 2 years. For most of my projects, I actually do a decent amount of research before creating any of the images or audio or video that are really the content of the project. So, for Trans Portraits, I worked for like a year in the studio developing lighting schemes and figuring out that I was going to use Bob Ross paintings as the backgrounds. So for Policing Gender, the same thing. I was writing, I wrote with my pen pals for like 8 months before making any images. And we talked about what the images could be and, what an artist could possibly do that was useful. But as part of that research phase, I also visited like historic prison sites, as well as functioning prisons. But one of the sites that I visited is this place called the Old Idaho Penitentiary. And so, so at this point, I've been writing with my pen pals for almost a year. I've been attending Black and Pink meetings. I've been reading Michelle Alexander and rereading Angela Davis. So to give you like an idea of where my headspace is at, right? I'm like basically learning about the horrors and injustices of the prison system. And so I go to this historic site thinking that I would maybe, I don't know, it was just kind of like research, like how are prison sites, let's say community, like what's the framework, what's the narrative around them as they're presented to visitors, right? Tourists. So this is actually a snapshot from my visit to the Idaho State Penitentiary. In the lobby, I noticed a flyer promoting their February programming, and it said, "Looking for something other than roses or chocolates this Valentine's Day? The Old Idaho Penitentiary is offering a unique alternative to your typical V-Day dates. Stroll through the site, snuggle up with your Valentine, and find the true meaning of ball and chain." Now, I mean, it's like so, it was so horrifying to me, honestly. And it really pointed to the fact, like this prison museum, that even while there are 2.5 million people incarcerated in the US, prisons are a fiction for those occupying dominant statuses. So prisons are the site of the other and experience for the enjoyment through like the cognitive safety of temporal distance, right? It's historical. So it's okay to like look back and snuggle up with a partner while walking through, and then even here, like this is, like I said, a snapshot from my visit. So the interesting thing is I kind of always thought that like the universe had brought me there to see this picture. So on my way out of this prison, I saw the photograph. It's a mugshot, and I just like froze in my steps. So this is Daisy Tommy Parsley, whose image was on display. Again, as part of their Valentine's exhibit. But basically, the important part being that there was this letter that was an appeal for parole to the state board. And the letter says, since I've come back this time, there's been a complete change in my life. I'm letting my hair grow. I wear nice little dresses and wouldn't think of putting on a pair of slacks or being tomboyish. I'm a regular little lady, end quote. So this letter from 1944 really makes it clear that they were being targeted and punished for their gender transgression, their quote, female masculinity. And the idea of policing gender kind of washed over me and like just stabbed me in the gut. Anyway, so yeah, I felt like this is, I don't know, just important in terms of my thinking and also the ways in which this is happening in a very tangible way throughout history, that it is still happening. And it's also about this idea of policing gender, about the sort of tacit ways we police each other to be gender normative. Yeah, so I'll move on. But so the title, Policing Gender, like I said, it refers to the surveillance and policing and punishment of LGBTQ bodies in the US. This is a phenomenon maybe most commonly visualized by the violent police raids of, I'm going to say gay and lesbian bars, because that's how they were known in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But that started at least a century earlier and continues today. So just, consider the unwarranted arrest of transgender women, especially women of color, the disproportionate regulation of quote, public indecency laws that target gay men, again, particularly of color, the longer prison sentences given to queer youth as compared to their, quote unquote, normative, like, let's say non-queer peers. And I have citations for the information I'm sharing at the end, so I have a lot of resources to share, but yeah, just so I can cite these sources. But I think that the criminalization of Blackness and queerness in today, like in our contemporary world, is really laid bare in the handling, both in the media and in the courts of the New Jersey Four. So these are 4 Black women who were sexually and violently threatened by a homophobic man, actually in the West Village of New York, which is historically and still today a queer neighborhood. So they were violently threatened by this homophobic man on the street. They defended themselves, and then they were convicted of felony assault and gang assault. And interestingly here, or importantly, the media referred to them as a quote, wolf pack and gang of killer lesbians, right? So this kind of just like makes me think, and I feel like it's important to think about like what representations of prisons and those who are in prison exist in US American popular consciousness. So much of the way we think about and talk about prisons in dominant media is either overtly criminalizing and dehumanizing people of color, specifically Black men, or making a joke out of it. I can't find it, but I've actually seen a SpongeBob SquarePants episode where they make like a "don't drop the soap" joke. And hey, that's a joke about rape, right? So like, let's just call that like what it is. It's also a joke. It's a joke about prison rape. And so why is that allowed, and why is it so pervasive, right? So thinking about the prison industrial complex and the ways that it maintains and cultivates its the prison industrial the PIC. I'm just going to call it the PIC, prison industrial complex. The way that it like maintains its power is through a multitude of ways, but including as critical resistance states, quote, creating mass media images that keep alive stereotypes of people of color, poor people, queer people, immigrants, youth, and other oppressed communities as criminal, delinquent, or deviant. And so I think this is really where photography comes in, right? Like we need to think about the ways that images promote and cultivate white supremacist ideologies and the systems in place that follow those ideologies. So to illustrate this point to my students, actually, I screen bell hooks in the video Cultural Criticism and Transformation. I highly recommend this. I think at some point it was available for free on YouTube. It's around, but if you need help finding it, I can help you find it. But in this video regarding like racist depictions, racist depictions as tropes in Hollywood, really. Bell Hooks says, quote, "It's not about imagination, it's about people consciously knowing what type of images will produce a certain kind of impact." So this is really talking and speaking to the intentionality of these tropes being used, right? It's not just about someone saying, well, this is what I thought of, imagination, right? It's about really this consciousness of knowing. And I think that as artists, we have a responsibility, maybe even especially as photographers, to know the impact our images will produce. So this idea of knowing and having a responsibility to the signifiers in our images and what messages are being portrayed is really sort of fundamental to my art practice. So again, kind of thinking about policing gender during the research phase, I kind of kept thinking like, I want to make a portrait, but not a portrait. I was thinking about the exploitation of LGBTQ bodies. I was also thinking about, you know, in relating to the Bell Hooks idea, that if I made images of queer people in prisons, that no matter how much text I include or stories I include kind of saying like why the prison system is wrong or why they were wrongfully imprisoned, or the fact, you know, let's circle back to this too, but to survival crimes, right? Or the fact that homelessness is illegal, you know, basically criminalized, right? So it's illegal to sleep on a bench in Dallas. It's illegal to give someone food in Houston, right? I think even in New York, it's illegal to sleep outside. Also in Dallas, it's like illegal to brush your teeth in public. So all these ways in which homelessness or houselessness is criminalized, right? If we think about that, and we think also then about the way that like 46% of 46% of homeless youth are queer. We just start to see the ways in which that queerness is really criminalized. And so I didn't want to sort of reiterate that idea that of queerness as criminal or as deviant, as something to be punished. So I was thinking like, if I make an image of a person, of a queer person, and some of the other visual cues in the images are, you know, cinder block walls, orange jumpsuits, you know, just literal visual references to the prison itself, I felt like there was going to be an automatic association, a visual association created. And so I didn't want to do that. So again, as part of my research phase, I was thinking about, okay, how can I make a portrait, but not a portrait? So I actually remembered that Kathy Opie at one point had cited the Renaissance portraitist Hans Holbein as a major influence on the formal qualities of her work. And the most like evident reference I found was in the use of fabric as a symbol of wealth, power, and beauty. And so I went actually to the library and grabbed some Holbein books. And the thing I noticed, again, this most evident thing was like this use of fabric. So here's like a little inset of a Holbein image. So I decided actually from there to photograph these like fabrics, try to make them look really lush, and created them for my pen pals, but with absence as the subject. Yeah. And by using absence, I'm also trying to deprive viewers of their desire to gape. I kind of can imagine that people who hear there's, you know, this art project policing gender and that it's a photography project, that there's going to be an expectation that there's going to be pictures of, you know, LGBTQ people behind bars. And I sort of am also playing with, or I'm okay with kind of, let's say, acknowledging that expectation, but then also intentionally depriving people of the satisfaction. I feel like, you know, we like in the US live in a culture where looking really is a manifestation of power and unearned privilege that goes too often goes unchallenged. Actually, Sarah and I we're just working on a journal article for Art Journal. And I call this like voyeuristic entitlement, right? This idea that we have an expectation that we'll get to see basically the most intimate, the most scandalous, but the most private matters in a person's life, but specifically marginalized communities, right? That photography will somehow get us in. And so I kind of wanted to call into question photography's role in surveillance and in basically exploitation of people, of literal figurative people's bodies, presences. So I actually did work to get access to a number of prisons and jails. But once I went on one tour actually, and I was just like, there's no way I'm bringing my camera here. Like, again, there's like a real power in the looking, right? I think in photography, we talk about this idea of who looks and who is looked upon. And I think that therein really is a power imbalance, especially if you're thinking about prisoners, right? Like, who don't have access to any of the visual culture that is being produced, at least not in real time. And it really don't. So like, again, this idea of like me photographing a queer prisoner or any prisoner and then presenting it to viewers in the free world, or the so-called free, in the outside, right? Outside of prison. How could I ever possibly account for the power imbalance between the viewers and the prisoners, right? There's no, it would never balance out, right? Again, the looking would never be able to be, the prisoners would never be able to take on the role of the seer or the looker. And I was like, I don't want people to get a rise out of my pen pals in their most vulnerable state. Like I said, I had gained access to some facilities. I actually don't really talk about this a lot, but one of my pen pals had worked to get makeup. One of my pen pals is a trans woman who worked to get makeup, which was a huge battle for her within prison. And, she asked me to take some pictures of her through, we did video chats, and we would talk and stuff. And so I made some pictures of her during our video chat and then was able to send them to her. But I don't share those with people, right? That was something that we did that was private. And it's like, I think that it's important to consider, again, looking at images as a privilege and a right. And, just want to say like that, my pen pals are trans and queer, young and old, out and not out, or coming out for the first time, helping others to come out also for the first time, and all happening behind bars. And like, if you haven't been incarcerated yourself, just imagine that, right? So each of the fabric images represents a set of circumstances that was told to me by my pen pals and is therefore named after them. So each is a combination of their names, and thereby also maintaining their anonymity. There's a set of aerial images or photographs in Policing Gender that are also part of the series. In addition, there's an audio piece, so there's really 3 components to the project. But the aerial photographs, they reference our perceptions and experiences of freedom. So they were shot from a hot air balloon and function as metaphors for like the inescapable presence of surveillance. Again, thinking about like the power of who looks and who is looked upon, right? So I'm using in these, I'll come back. In these images, I'm using in like the language of photography, the type of images that normally speak to a truth, right? They're black and white. They are like 35 millimeter ratio. These are all sort of, again, signifiers to a traditional quote unquote straight photography that subconsciously we know is associated with truth. However, they are not, it's like actually someone has actually done a review of the project and incorrectly wrote that these pictures were taken near prison sites. They're not. And one of the things I'm hoping to do with the project, like with these, is I'm like really calling into question the assumptions we make about photographs. So in addition to the assumptions we make about what photographs we should be allowed to see and what photography should be doing, I'm also kind of saying like really the truth value of photography overall is something that is worth questioning if we are going to try to use photography as a means for social change. Also of note, since we're at the Museum of Contemporary Photography, part of the reason for using the hot air balloon is because during the Civil War, the first aerial reconnaissance images were created using a hot air balloon. So hot air balloon was really was the first tool to create sort of methods of grand surveillance. So I feel like that was an important history to mention. I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to pause my share and just make sure that the audio is turned on, because there is a 1-minute clip of the audio that is a part of Policing Gender here. And I just want to make sure that the audio is turned on. Oh, here we go. Got it. So Policing Gender was in the show Disruptive Perspectives at the Museum of Contemporary Photography in 2017. Hopefully I'm getting that right. And so this is an installation shot from the museum. And sometimes I show the work with like audio, with the audio with headsets, but it's really my preference to have it playing ambiently. And I was so pleased and like grateful that MoCP was willing to play the audio. It was a group show, and the audio kind of permeated the space. I think Kristen, you could attest to this, but you know, even in your meetings and stuff, you would all of a sudden hear the pulsing sounds from Policing Gender. So I was just really pleased with the install of this at the museum. So here's again a 1-minute clip. Oh, and again, they are the sounds you're hearing are excerpts from conversations that I've had with my pen pals through video chat, and ambient sounds recorded on site at the prison tour I went on. I actually recorded audio, but didn't tell them that I was recording audio. And then I also included some background sounds from our video chats. There's one sound at the very end that I created that you'll kind of hear. And that was created to mimic the sort of like unending oppressive sounds that prisoners have to face every day, day in and day out, by virtue of being in prison. So here it is.
On my intake sheet where security issues, it says homosexual.
When you're handcuffed, they'll be escorting you. They'll smash your head in the floor, knock your teeth out. It happens. You'd be surprised.
And I'm tired of people looking at us as though we are animals.
Out there, at least you have people with cell phones to record this stuff. In here, it's complete secrecy.
So, I think, as I mentioned, when I started writing with my pen pals, kind of my first letter, I was like, this is me, I'm Lorenzo, I'm trans, and I teach photography, and I have this grant, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't help with certain things. I'm an artist, and what do you think as an artist I could do? And are you interested in talking about this with me? And well, first of all, a number of people were interested in talking about the project and participating. But I also said, if you're not interested, that's cool. But if you still want a pen pal, we can write. And a number of people wrote back saying that they would like to have a pen pal, but that their release date was coming up soon. So they didn't really want to talk about the prison system and how messed up it is, because they were scared that they would get retaliation against them from the guards, but also from like the parole, the pardon officers, like people who are in charge of releasing people. And so, yeah, and so there was basically like a number of people who were like saying like, I'm going to get released soon. I really can't risk that. And the thing is, like, when they're saying they're getting released soon, they're saying in 2 or 3 years, right? So that's just like another thing for people who have not been part of the system, like something to consider. Like the amount of time is just, it's really excruciating even to think about. But anyway, with Pleasing Gender, so out of these conversations, right, I'm like, so I'm an artist, I don't want to create these pictures of people. I feel like the audio piece was a way for me to share specific stories from people in their own voices, literally. And that was like what I heard overwhelmingly was, you know, if you can just get this information out, like you heard in the audio piece, out here we have cell phones to record this, right? And we've seen this. We've seen the videos, as horrible it is to share images of violence. There is something to be said about the information that we can get, right, by sharing. And prisons are, we don't have access to prisons. Prisons actually function under a separate law. So even journalists, the laws are separate for within prisons, and wardens are allowed to write their own sort of guidelines for within their prisons. So there's no like journalistic freedom in terms of gathering audio or interviews or pictures from within prisons. It's all up to the wardens of each individual facility. So the secrecy is actually it's built into the structure and built into the system. So I have made it my my goal or my intention that every time I show the work, I host and create programming to activate and cultivate community around prison abolition. So this was a moth-style storytelling event hosted at the BGSQD, which is the Bureau of General Services Queer Division in New York City's West Village. And this was an event featuring stories from formerly incarcerated members of our queer community in New York. I also share, and I continue to share, pictures with my pen pals. So you'll see at the bottom of the slide here, there's like the same service that you could do video chats with. You can upload pictures and share. It's exorbitantly expensive, and actually a large quantity of my grant funding actually went towards video chats. It's like $10 for $7.50 for 15 minutes, right? So that's, again, another issue. But anyway, but I do still, so I went, this is from 2016, I went to the Trans Liberation March, and I just gave people the sign to hold up so I could take pictures and send them to my pen pals. I also continue to pair pen pals who are on the inside with new people to write with on the outside. As part of Disruptive Perspectives, I gave a presentation in Switzerland at their conference called Queer Fear in Bern. And at the end of the talk, I asked everyone who was willing to gather together to take a group shot for my pen pals for me to send to them. Here's a workshop that I hosted at the Kansas City Art Institute during my week-long residency there in conjunction with an exhibition of Policing Gender. For the Kansas City Art Institute, I also created an exhibition with like in a different space, sort of adjacent to the Policing Gender exhibition space. I created like an exhibition space, like where I projected a video onto the floor that was the size of a solitary confinement cell, and students created work stemming from the workshop and the discussions we had earlier in the week, and then continued to populate that space throughout the remainder of their semester. I have made it a goal to bring this work to all 50 states, planting like seeds of prison abolition as I go. So far I've been to 8 states, New York, Illinois, California, Oregon, Washington, Kansas, and Rhode Island. I'm happy to visit those states more than once. I actually have done visits in more than once in some of those states, but like I said, I've made it a goal to reach all 50 states with this programming and project. kind of related to this, and I'm going to wrap up soon because I really didn't want to talk much more than 30 minutes. But in relation to this, in July 2019, I juried and co-curated the exhibition "Criminalize This: The Social Policing of Gender and the Criminalization of Queerness" with Mary Gagler at Amos Eno Gallery in Brooklyn. We had over 70 artists in the show, so if you know me, I like to think if you're going to do something, you should overdo it. But this is us installing. It was a very intense week of install, but it turned out really beautifully, I think. But work was included from a range of artists, from established and emerging, incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. And one of the artists forming the foundation of the show was Slava Magutin, who was the first Russian to be granted political asylum in the US on the grounds of homophobic persecution. For the closing of the show, we hosted an event, which was an evening of performance art to celebrate the radical creative space we all cultivated during the month of the show. So we also hosted like a prison letter and card writing day, as well as a zine workshop as part of the show. And really our goal was, again, to create a space, like a queer creative space where we can basically cultivate our radical ideas, right? Like create a space for ourselves in that way. You know, talking about this like right now from quarantine, it feels really kind of emotional to think about the importance of those spaces. And I've been really just happy to see also like even like these Zoom events. So Kristen and MoCP, thank you for hosting this. I think it's really important, you know, even virtually, that we can be in the same space and in conversation. That's important. I also wanted to talk about Monumental Resistance Stonewall, which is a performance photography and time-lapse video piece created with Sarah. This piece is really an homage to the trans activists of color who fought with their lives for trans queer liberation, including prison abolition, and that catalyzed the Stonewall Uprising of 1969, yet have largely been excluded from the ensuing civil rights advances. So Sarah and I were talking about this idea of resistance fatigue, and as part of an industrial organizational psychologist, you should come back over here, by the way. But there you go. Okay. Sarah studies fatigue, like, and in all of its forms or whatever, in groups. But we were thinking about resistance fatigue and how to combat that, how to resist resistance fatigue. Like, yeah, so we just came up with this idea where I would stand for 24 hours this was during New York City Pride 2018. So in 15-second increments, we created over 3,500 images. You know, I'm just gonna say real quick, the really beautiful thing about this was that I was trying to stand there as an emblem to like keep fighting, that like I can, you know, it's really about endurance and the long run, and like yes, we have marriage now, but there's so much more that we need to fight for, in prison abolition, right, and ending white supremacy, and so here I am, I'm standing there. And the kind of really beautiful thing that was kind of unexpected was that as I was faltering and not really sure how I was going to last, you know, another 15 hours, you know, like, so we started at midnight on Friday. By like 5 a.m. on Saturday morning, I'm like, oh no, like, what have I gotten myself into? How am I going to do this? But as I, you know, would be like, you know, faltering, people would come by and cheer me on, or give me a kiss on the cheek, take selfies with me. And it really became like this metaphor of like, that we can really do anything in community, that we can't do it alone, we do it in community. Also in 2018, Sarah and I created this image really in response to the Won't Be Erased movement and rallies that started after the Trump administration tried to define gender as basically like trying to say that they needed a federal level definition of gender that was either male or female and not allowed to be changed. So basically saying like, no more trans. And so if you haven't heard of this, I encourage you to look up #Won'tBeErased. But people started to produce images like about, hey, we exist. This is not, you can't just try to erase us. So, so we created this image. This is actually, Sarah kind of had this vision of me on this stump, obviously like referring to like Botticelli's Venus. And then I was like, oh, glitter. So let's do that. But then, so then I was awarded a workspace residency through the Baxter Street Camera Club of New York, which is an amazing organization. I'll send a link to it. Hopefully, Kristen, help me remember to put a link to that in the chat of this. But this is basically like drawing from this image. We said, you know, let's continue down this road. Let's think about trans existence and how to picture that. And we started this project called Shimmer Shimmer. And so this image is from 2020, but as part of the residency and as part of the exploration of what the pictures would be for the residency, I stopped taking testosterone. After 10 years of quote unquote hormone therapy, in June 2019, I stopped taking testosterone. And that was partially because I was frustrated with constantly passing as male and people saying things like, oh my God, I never would have known you were trans. Like, as if that was a really big compliment to me, like that my ultimate goal in life would be to look like a real man, right? In quotes there. And it's people with well-intentioned, you know, trying to like say like whatever, but like literally saying to me like, good job, like a doctor, right? One time telling me, oh, I didn't know that upon meeting them at the first time, I didn't know you were trans. Wow, okay, good work. I'm like, what in the? So I really felt like I needed to claim genderqueerness and claim that that space for myself, but also again in like the visual representations. Yeah, so I stopped taking testosterone, and this was sort of an attempt to render my body like literal and metaphorical object of gender abolition. The photographs are all taken at Jacob Riis Beach, the People's Beach of New York, and there's a section of the beach that is sort of like a queer haven for everyone in the summer, and it's a part of the beach that has, I'm gonna jump forward for 1 second. So here's like a picture of it. So this is a really long, miles long beach. And actually, ironically, at the other end, there's like basically a closed community for like NYPD people, which is like, anyway, horrifying. But anyway, it's a very scary place with like more American flags that I've ever seen in my life. But so this is the queer section. And there's like this like decrepit building, all these fences that are like, there's like barbed wire everywhere. And I think that at first glance, and you can see here, like this building is all, busted up. At first glance, you might be like, oh yeah, the queer people kind of just taking the leftovers from the straight people. But really, why I love this space and why it's so important, and is that I think of it as an anti-assimilationist space, that we are here in this particular part specifically because straight people don't go there. It's not about us saying like, oh, let me just take your leftovers. It's about saying like, we see you not using this area because you don't find it very appealing. So great, we'll go there and you can leave us alone. Yeah, anti-assimilationist. As part of the series, we're also creating images constellation pictures, but really made of glitter. So it's, I think you can see the glitter in these, but there's, I'm covered in glitter in all of these, and we're really trying to, use camp and use this sort of acknowledging, like I think of myself as like, or thinking, I kind of call myself sometimes a self-described centaur, right? Like this, like, I don't know, like thinking about queerness as magical and mythical, and then using glitter to kind of emphasize that. And then these are another set of images that go along with it. Again, thinking about constellations and the way that astrology is really important to us in our community as a way to sort of engage with spirituality, or just like even to connect with each other and explain, explain things, relations and things like that, but outside of a patriarchal structure or way of talking, outside of a patriarchal religious structure, for example. These are just a couple behind the scenes pictures. Yeah, this is Sarah getting pummeled by some waves while photographing me. Totally good sport, kind of amazing collaborator. We did shoot these all in the winter, so there's also an elaborate set of warmth tools like that needed to happen, and they obviously were photographed very quickly. Yeah, so that's what we're working on now. And actually, I gathered these pictures because Baxter Street is redoing their website. It's just going to launch like the middle or end of August, and they were asking for like behind the scenes images. And so I, luckily, the other day was like going through them all. It was actually really fun. But the show was supposed to open in April with everything shut down. It's not happening, and so we're looking at the fall. We're thinking that it's gonna happen in the fall. We don't know, but again, this is all for for Baxter Street Camera Club of New York. And so with their support is how we made that project. I think thinking about the space of re-speech and thinking about really claiming space as our own and using my body as a form of my art, I'm thinking, this is really rooted in a history of queer AIDS activists, artists using the city as a political site, and also feminists as using their bodies as political sites. And so I just wanted to point that out as a source of inspiration. And that I believe, silence equals death. I think this is important today, just as important today as it was in '87 when when ACT UP made the connection between silence around AIDS, annihilation of gay people. I think that it's been really inspiring to see the ways, even on social media, but among my friends in personal correspondence, but also in social media, that we really are, as a people, trying to share information about ending racism right now and educating ourselves and all of that. And I think that's super. I feel like there's a moment that we are really in that we can take advantage of. So I wanted to share a few resources, and then we can kind of open it up and talk a little bit. But so these are just a few of the books that were really important for my thinking around policing gender. I actually believe that the new Jim Crow should be mandatory reading for everyone across the US. I think it should be part of curriculum in our schools. Captive Genders is an amazing resource for thinking about prison abolition as a queer issue specifically. Can't Catch a Break. I think this is a really important book. Because it's Can't Catch a Break, Gender, Jail. I'm sorry that this PDF is so pixelated, but Gender, Jail, and the Limits of Personal Responsibility. And so really it's about changing the narrative from someone goes to prison because they made a bad choice, right? They have this responsibility. They made well, you shouldn't have stolen that loaf of bread or whatever, right? It's again, the idea that people are only in prison because they've made bad choices, while people who are not in prison have made good choices, is really incorrect. It overlooks the ways in which certain people are targeted and others aren't, right? So statistically, white people use marijuana, and I don't have the numbers, but white people use marijuana something like 10 times more, if someone wants to Google it real quick or whatever, than people of color. And yet people of color, specifically Black people, are imprisoned at rates 10 times higher than white people for drugs, right? For marijuana specifically. So again, also legalizing marijuana is also an issue of race and class. But I think this idea of personal responsibility is so much rooted in the capitalism that our country is founded upon. This idea that we can each individually make the lives that we want to have, and that it doesn't take into consideration any of the systems or social structures that we live within. I can share these in the chat window. Here's some more information about queer imprisonment, why that's important. Here are a few links of interest. Black and Pink, again, really amazing. If you're interested in becoming a pen pal, they have wonderful resources to get you set up right away. Critical Resistance, again, the forefront, the leaders in prison abolition, because Critical Resistance was started by, and I'm gonna mess this up, but Angela Davis and, I'm sorry, a number, like I think 2 other people. It started out as a conference about the prison industrial complex, and then became a full-fledged organization, grassroots, doing totally amazing work, full of resources and amazing videos on their site. And then Tourmaline and Dean Spade, 2 really important figures in prison abolition scholarship and activism and art. There's a 4-part series through Barnard that's really worth watching. So that's what I have for you. And then again, I'm gonna try to just drop in a bunch of links into the chat window that you all can like copy and save. So thank you for listening. That was a little longer than I was hoping, but I'm looking forward to talking.
Hey, Lorenzo, can we actually post your slides? Would that be okay? Or at least the last ones with those links for anybody that would?
Yeah.
So we'll make that available on our website too.
Okay,
so
cool.
To paste all those in. But if anyone has any questions, please post them now. So far, we do not have any, which is crazy. But I have one. Your portraits and policing gender, or your not portraits with the top series. Do you share those with your pen pals, and do they see those in the end of your project?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Good question. Yep. Yep, some of them actually got like postcard from the first show of it. I tried to send, sometimes it's like so random what gets through and what doesn't. But yes, I have shared printed out pictures for them all.
Have you had any reactions to them or from the people you're picturing?
So it's very like positive, you know, like very excited. But it's this thing where, to be honest, when you're working with, like, in my experience, like my pen pals, any like correspondence is so like appreciated in a way, you know. I mean, I would just write like, you know, I'm happy to be writing with you, like, because there was so much like, thank you so much, you know. And I'm like, it's not really, you know, it's, I'm happy to be doing this. But yeah, so there was definitely like an appreciation about like how beautiful they were, but also an appreciation of just having something beautiful to have in their cell, you know? So any correspondence is like so welcomed. I'm gonna copy these links in before I forget. Is that okay?
Yeah, should I ask you questions while you do that, or will that be distracting?
No, it's okay, go ahead. No, I don't want to be paste.
Okay.
Maybe we'll send it out separately. I don't know how to do it best. It's like not copy and paste, but okay, I'll do it in a second.
Yeah, we can post it to the event archive page where people can access it there.
Awesome.
Juno Rosenhaus says, incredible work. How many pen pals do you have, and how can I or we take your queer studies class?
Oh, cool. Thank you for the question. So at one point I had almost 40, because there were like my pen pals would tell their friends and stuff that I was writing. But I also at the beginning let them know that I would be, once, you know, that the project kind of came to a completion, that I would connect them with new pen pals. And I still do keep in touch with them through like the video, through the chat. So it's almost like text messaging. So I still write with my pen pals in there. There's been actually a few who have been released. And so we're friends on like Facebook. But so every workshop that I've done, I've also enlisted new people to become pen pals. So, Juno, thank you for your question. I think you can write to me directly, or, oh, Ruth Wilson, who just texted Ruth Wilson Gilmore? Oh my gosh, yes, thank you. But Black and Pink, if you go to the Black and Pink website, there's like a drop down for becoming pen pals with people. And they include like what you might want to include in your letter, what you might not want. I actually also have a template letter for people who don't know where to start. So you can email me or Black and Pink.
Great. Leslie Lyon is wondering if you can talk a little more about the hot air balloon photos and why you chose those sites.
Yeah, so actually, Sarah and I, you should stop being shy. Come on. Sarah and I, so I knew that I wanted to, first of all, I knew that because the thing is, Sarah was in that hot air balloon too, right? So this is the other thing about collaborating and like about us and like that we're so much like involved in each other's work. Anyway, but for example, Sarah was in the hot air balloon too, even while it was crash landing. But so I knew that I wanted to photograph from a hot air balloon because of actually the sort of strange heights that you get. I had been in one before for my thesis project, actually. I now weaseled my way into two free hot air balloon rides. But I knew that you get these sort of like strange heights. I suppose I could have used a drone, but
that's creepy.
That is, yeah, it's creepy. It's just like, I'm like not, that was just not, I don't know. I knew that from the hot air balloon, I would have control over it, and that and using a drone was not something I wanted to introduce into this project, right? Just as like a method, ew. And so, yeah, and then I was thinking about, well, yeah, like the history of photography and how again, hot air balloons were, we think of them as this like, fun and like floating, and they are this like super like light,
buoyant and beautiful thing.
There you go, buoyant and beautiful, and yet they were first used, and yet this is like, as soon as we have something beautiful, the US is like, oh, how can we use this for war, right? So like, okay, let's use it for recon, let's, and the sites, basically, so Sarah and I went to so I was looking for a balloon, someone to let me in their balloon, and I found this amateur balloonist society, and I went on their website, and there was like no email, there was no, and the whole website was just a printed newsletter, and it said our next meeting is Saturday, blah, blah, blah. And this was a Thursday, and I was like, oh, that's 2 days from now. So Sarah and I just like showed up to the meeting and gave our pitch, and one person said, okay, I'll let you know, and when the weather conditions are right, I'm happy to have you in.
And they were an amazing group of people. They're all pilots and very careful, very precise people, and it was a real pleasure to go up with them. Even though we did crash on the landing.
And so as I went up, I was actually thinking initially that I would be photographing sort of grandiose landscapes as a metaphor for freedom and like nature as something that's free. But then as I'm looking, I mean, probably because in my head I'm thinking about how it's so ridiculous that like I'm in this literally most free state, floating through the air, right, with no tethers, compared to my pen pals and other prisoners. And so I think the photographs, the resulting photographs are really all nature hemmed in and constrained.
I think we only have time for one more. Laurie Maud Chenard would like to say, can you talk a little bit about the process of creating the trans portraits, how you chose the fabric, style, designs, drapery, scenes, lighting, etc., based off of your pen pal conversations or relationships? I think actually they're asking about the Policing Gender series.
So I came up with the idea to do the fabrics, and then talked to my pen pals about that. Does that seem like a good idea? Yes, that seems cool. And then also at the same time talked with them about doing the audio recordings and how that would work together. And they were like, yes, that sounds great. And so then I kind of started moving forward, and I sourced the fabrics from a local theater. So yes, thank you for the question. So it's basically, so I went, so this local theater for their sets would have all these like textiles and things. And so, there was a local theater that was willing to let me borrow them and photograph them and then bring them back.
Great. Well, and then, I think we have 1 more minute, so I'll ask this last question. Okay. Can you share the journal article on voyeuristic entitlement, or when it's finished? I think I misheard. Thank you for sharing your work. It's so important, especially right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, thanks. Yes, it'll be an art journal like next year, like a year from now, basically. That's the process. But I also just, before we wrap, really just, we've been all sharing so many resources online lately, right? Like lists of ways to get involved. And I just want to remind everyone to take a minute and actually engage with the lists. And so that's why I think writing, like doing pen paling is like, it's such like a tangible way to do something. Because as Black and Pink states, every time we send a letter, it's like breaking, it's chipping away at the bricks in the wall.
Well, thank you so much, Lorenzo. This was great. And Sarah, thank you. I know you're a little camera shy, but it was great to see you again. And next week we have Ame Bobien doing a behind the lens visit, and Ame's work is incredibly intricate, and the studio is pretty remarkable. So I hope you all can join us there. And then before that, on Wednesday, we'll do a Photos of Zoom session on alternative processes with Carissa Meyer. So please stay tuned to the MoCP.org and follow Lorenzo and Sarah's important work on all of their channels as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.